looking for a new position, how would I like? I have the one-page resume, the template that you gave me,
Mhm.
but how like would you recommend strategizing in the sense of like when I go for an interview, like for example, um, I have two companies that are interested right now, Qualcomm and Petco, which are
Okay.
here in San Diego,
Mhm.
and so they're going to ask in the sense of, oh, you've been consulting, and so in a sense of how do I mitigate that basically.
So do you mean how does consulting affect you, like your ability to land those jobs? Like how is it perceived by those companies, et cetera?
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
And we've talked about what you were consulting in before, Michael, but can you just catch me up real fast?
So right now I'm just doing project-based IT. So in a
Mhm.
sense of I'll do wireless access points, or I'll consult in a sense of a small business enterprise resource management, stuff like that, basically. So it's more
Okay.
on a very small scale.
Got it. And the roles you're applying for, is that at all relevant to like the stuff that you would be doing day to day in those roles, or is it pretty different?
No, 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 pretty much the same as program
Okay.
management. So program or project management.
Yeah. So if that's the case, I would absolutely flaunt it. So for
Okay.
me, that was one of the most helpful things when I was looking for a job. And this is kind of a great segue into the topic of breaking into a new industry, because when I started, I was sort of with you. I wasn't sure about putting entrepreneurial experience on my resume, or just talking about it in general in interviews with new contacts, et cetera. But what I found was that if I didn't have a lot of experience in a job, and in your case, I know that you have a little bit of background, so
Right.
it may be slightly different. I still think it's very applicable, but
Right.
when you step out of the realm of the 9 to 5 and you start investing your own time and your own money into a specific area and a specific skill set, that resonates really
Right.
well with people, because it shows that you're driven, right? You're not just showing up to
Mm,
work for the paycheck and
right.
headed home. You're investing
Right.
in yourself to learn new stuff. But then on top of that, you learn so many new skills from pitching to
Most
clients,
definitely.
starting a business. So yeah, we're talking about a little bit of sales. We're talking about doing your own accounting. We're talking about
Right.
balancing your business checkbook. Do you have an LLC or anything like that? Or are you just running it through
No,
your, yeah.
no, right now, no. And I took another piece of your advice. I'm on, oh, uh, there we go. So, so I took another piece of your advice, Austin, in the sense of you said find somebody that you look up to, or that is someone that is aspirational, and have them mentor you.
Yep.
And so basically that's how all this started, basically in the sense of the consulting. And so I was at a former company, and then well, matter of fact, the person, my main client, she owns basically a very big HR firm.
Okay.
And so she's my biggest client. And so that's how basically I got into the consulting realm. And just in a sense, it's just like, you want a little bit more flexibility. Just try it out for a while and see
Mhm.
what you think. And then you can always go back to a 9 to 5, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, totally. But you're not doing it full time, right?
No.
Yeah. So that's the best way to do it, in my opinion. I mean, that's how I'm doing this right now. You guys all know that I still have a full-time job.
Right.
I do this on the side. I've pretty much always had a business on the side.
Right.
But those are the skills that I really pitch. That's what got me my job today.
Understood.
Because all my side business stuff was in search engine marketing, and
Mm,
none of my traditional 9 to 5 experience was in search. It was in the realm of digital. It was in the startup realm, tech.
right.
But what I really leaned on when I was applying at Microsoft, at Google, et cetera, was the outside experience, because
Mm,
I walked them through the whole process, saying, I reached out
hmm.
to these people cold, I pitched them cold, I sold the
Right.
deals in, I set the pricing, I managed all their accounts. Here were the results that I got. I made them
Right.
profitable, and people really resonated with that, because you covered the spectrum, and you show that you're not afraid to take on new projects. You're not afraid to step outside of your comfort zone. And so when you bump up against, you're a competitive candidate they're doing great things, I'm sure, especially when you get into the later rounds of interviewing at work. But at the end of the day, who am I going to pick if I'm the employer, right? Am I going to pick the guy who does the exact same thing Michael does, or am I going to take Michael, who's proven that he's not afraid to invest in himself, step outside boundaries, and really get after it?
Most definitely.
Cool. Cool. Anybody else have some topics, have some questions? I can talk side stuff all day too. We can shift the focus here if you want.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, for sure.
Hi, this is Sabrina. So my question is that in terms of building your side hustle or entrepreneurial work, what would you recommend? Building your Instagram follower or email list that will convert into like subscribers or eventually sales?
Yeah, email list, 100%. Like that's the thing that you should focus on before you focus on anything else. The main reason is that you don't want to rely on another platform to kind of house your audience. So there's a lot of people out there. I'm sure I know you guys are part of some other Facebook groups, and maybe you're part of some LinkedIn groups, or you're on Instagram or whatever. But in those cases, like Facebook owns your audience, or Instagram is Facebook, but they own your audience, or LinkedIn owns your audience. Whereas your email list is yours. Like, I'll give you a great example. When you scale your Facebook audience up to a certain amount, your posts don't reach the entire audience. So I think my Facebook group for Cultivated Culture is a fraction of the email list, but my posts don't reach everybody in there. I actually have to pay Facebook more to reach people who already said that they want to be a part of Cultivated Culture. Whereas with my email list, it goes out to every single person. So you own that, right? And the email service providers are they'll update their product, they'll make their product better, but they're never going to affect the deliverability, right? That's all dependent on you. So that's absolutely the number one thing that you should focus on. And I wouldn't recommend focusing on more than one platform at once. When I started out, I actually did start out on Instagram, and my profile is still sitting up there. I haven't posted in like probably a year or something, but I focused on growing that, and I grew it up to like 24,000 followers, and none of them were really converting into subscribers. Then I turned back to email, and I really focused on that until I had a critical mass, and then I went back to another social platform. There were definitely times when I've been building Cultivated Culture where I tried to get into a couple different things, right? Some guru out there is like, Facebook ads are the best, or Facebook marketing is the best, and then somebody's like, focus on LinkedIn. Then somebody else comes and they're like, Instagram's amazing, and you're like, shit, I have to get on all these platforms. And then you spread yourself thin, and it's really, really hard to do a great job on more than one, especially when you're starting out. So what I'd recommend is pick one. Email is what I recommend. Social can be good if you want to become like an influencer in a space. It's much easier to gain social followers than it is to gain email subscribers. If you want to make money, like your own money, like side business money, email subscribers is the way to go. If you want to become somebody who's like a speaker, who's sought after for events, who's looked up to in the industry, you can still do that with email subscribers, but social media is a much faster way to do that. That's just a little bit harder to monetize. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, it's really clear, because I'm trying to build both of them at the same time, and I just don't have enough focus or time, because I'm also working full time. That's why.
Totally. Yeah. And I hear you 100%. When you have a full-time job, you got to really pick and choose where your time goes, right? So I would 100% focus on mastering one. And once you get that to a critical mass, to a point where, you feel like you've mastered it, it's under control, and it's no longer like a chore to manage it, that's when you can kind of move on to the next one. So for me, that was I'd say about 2,000 to 3,000 person mark on the email list before. Now, as you guys have noticed, like I've started posting way more on LinkedIn, and I've been working on building that, but I've been doing this for a year and a half, just to give you some context.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Cool. We got a couple more people who joined here, but anybody else have some questions you want to throw out?
I do.
Sure. All right, Cheryl, I think
yeah.
Is that you? Okay, awesome. Hit me.
After 20 years as a teacher, I want to get into the tech field.
Okay.
But I've got folks telling me, like during interviews or even before I get to an interview, well, you don't have any experience with project management or you don't have any experience with supervision, being a supervisor.
Mhm.
And I'm looking at them like, are you crazy? Have you ever stepped in a classroom?
Definitely.
How do I convince them, though,
Mhm.
that my skills are absolutely transferable?
Definitely. So just to clarify a little bit, so the main roles that you're targeting are either in management or project management. So like people management or project management. Or
Yeah,
people management?
I've not developed the coding skills yet, but I'm still working on that as a side.
Yeah.
But I still want to get my foot in the door, even customer service,
Okay.
customer success. I've worked with people over 20 years, and you've got to be successful
Definitely.
just to be able to get things done.
Yeah, 100%. So how are you going about applying for these jobs? Walk me through the process here. We'll take it from.
I've got a target list of some companies that I'd like to work for. I have reached out to a couple of hiring managers who, well, I'm sorry, but we don't have a position right now.
Okay.
I've done the online job submission thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it goes into a black hole.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Have you tried targeting people who might be your manager if you got hired, or like the person sitting next to you, like your colleague, same level, your peer on your team?
Yes, I have actually with one company. I
Okay.
reached out directly to the hiring manager who would have been my supervisor.
Mm-hmm.
And he came back and said, "Thank you very much for your application, but we're going in a different direction."
Okay. So Cheryl, how many companies have you applied to in total across all those mediums that you just mentioned?
Probably about 40.
Okay. And only at one of them have you reached out to somebody who would be like your manager or your peer?
Actually, 3 of them, and I've gotten negative responses.
And what do you mean by a negative response?
Thank you, but we're
Okay.
going in a different direction. And
Got
one company I've actually applied to twice because I'd really like to work with them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still the same hiring manager, the same supervisor.
Mm-hmm.
I need to figure out how to differentiate myself now versus 6 months ago.
Yeah, 100%. So what I'd recommend, especially if you're okay with just trying to get your foot in the door, which I don't recommend that you take like an entry-level job to do that. But what I do recommend is for those 40 companies, try and find those people that I mentioned, somebody who would be your manager, somebody who would be your peer, somebody who would be close to the team, and go through the steps. Try to get them on the phone, reach out to them cold. It sounds like you don't have a problem doing that. But see if you can have that conversation with them. You're definitely going to run into people who are not as open to having conversations, who just don't really want to talk. But the way that you kind of hedge your bets is just by reaching out to more people. It's really a numbers game. So the way that I like to think about it is basically if I want 3 job interviews, I know that I need, let's say, call it 6 final round interviews, which means I need 20 first round interviews. And in order to get 20 first round interviews, I need to reach out to X number of people. So you can kind of back it out. The number that I recommend can sound a little scary. My number that I found to be successful is 100 people total. That can be 10 people at 10 companies. That's usually about the ratio that I recommend. If you want to start smaller than that, that's totally fine. But I don't recommend reaching out to recruiters because you run into the same issue that you run into applying online. Like those people are basically like the human version of the online application. Like they get so many emails from people like you who think that, if I reach out directly to the recruiter, I'll circumvent the online application process. But what ends up happening usually is even if you get in touch with them, some are very, very nice and some will have the conversation with you. I would say that most will funnel you back into the online application process and you get lost in that black hole that you mentioned.
That's what's happened.
Exactly. So when you target the people who might be your manager, might be your peer, those people aren't getting emails every day from folks who might be interested in the company, and they're the ones who are going to have the final say, right? So you're probably going to end up interviewing with one of them, but they're also going to be the ones who are going to know what challenges the team's facing, what initiatives are coming up. They're going to have their own personal goals, and so if you can hop on the phone with them and you can learn a little bit more about them, you can learn a little bit more about those challenges, those goals, and find ways to provide value against it. That's absolutely your best way to get your foot in the door. And then that gives you a space or a platform to prove out your value before you start the interview process, before you apply. Because when you apply online, you only have, a couple pieces of paper. You got your cover letter, if somebody reads it at all, you got your resume, and then maybe you have a couple application questions or like an optional uploadable file.
Right.
And it's really tough to differentiate yourself from the other folks who are applying online who saw that job description and they're like, man, I fit these credentials. Like, let's go for it. Because there's tons of those people when you go through the online funnel. But if you create that personal connection with somebody and you show them, you prove out to them that you can already do the job, like you can already provide that value, that's where you're going to solidify that in their mind. You're going to remove the doubt, and then you're going to possibly be able to get a referral. That's the end goal, right? And so if you do get that referral, one, you automatically kind of jump to the top of the list a little bit, whereas everybody else who's applying cold, who am I going to choose if I'm the company, right? If I'm going to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars in somebody over the course of several years, am I going to pick Joe Schmo who applied online I've never heard of, or am I going to pick Cheryl who came in through John, who's our best salesperson or one of our best project managers, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's definitely what I recommend. If you have questions or want to understand like how to create or provide value a little bit more, I did just write an article on that and I can send it to you, or we can talk about it a little bit more offline.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And I believe when you were asking your question, somebody else had one too. I don't know if that person's still here, but
I have a question.
You guys want? Yeah, shoot.
This is Cheeto. I wanted to ask about taking courses.
Mm-hmm.
What would you, first of all, would you recommend things like Udemy and stuff?
Mm-hmm.
And second of all, how do certifications add value, and how?
Definitely. And I think that's a great question. So mostly because that's step one, right? So that's really like how I like to think about it. So if we're talking about breaking into a new industry here, if you want to break into a new industry, you have to have some sort of experience. You can apply all the strategies that I have on my site and you can go through all the motions, but at the end of the day, when you get to the interview, if you come up against somebody who has some industry experience, it's going to be really tough for the company to take a risk on somebody who hasn't invested any time, any resources, anything. And that person is completely leaning on the company, taking a risk on them to teach them and invest in them. That's a very risky investment for the company. And at the end of the day, companies want to minimize their risk, right? They want to minimize expenses, minimize risk, maximize profits. So if you're trying to get a job in a new industry, you have to find some way to get some sort of experience. So the best way, and if you want experience, right, you need a foundation. You need to understand the basic skills, like the table stakes. And that's where I think courses are great. So I still take courses all the time. Udemy is fantastic. Coursera is fantastic, especially because those come with university accreditations. I think you can say that you took it and put it on your resume if you want like the certificate. I think it's like $50. Sometimes maybe more expensive. I don't know how worthwhile that is, but definitely going through and getting the knowledge is great. So to give you an example from my story, I didn't know anything about digital when I started. And so what I did was I took the courses to get that foundational knowledge. So I took courses on digital marketing. I took courses on search engine marketing, on Google Analytics, on data and how that relates to the internet and how you can use that to get people to your site and drive more sales, et cetera. And I did that all to get a foundational knowledge. But when it comes to actually applying for jobs, courses alone don't really cut it. I mean, it's way better than having nothing at all. But you really need to try and find some real world experience that you can point to. So that could be like if you're trying to get a development job, that could be a website that you built. If you're trying to get a job in marketing, you could start your own like agency, or you could freelance, like I did. And freelance covers actually a lot of those bases as well. But what I recommend the courses for is to get the knowledge and to get the certifications and to get that like social proof that you can then use to go out and get those real results, be it building that site, building that app, getting some freelance clients, etc. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, no problem. Cool. Keep them coming, guys. Who else has something they want to talk about?
Oh, I do. What's the best way to get freelance opportunities?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Andrew, right?
Yes.
Okay, I'm cheating. I got all your names here. Yeah. So, how much experience do you have doing what service are you selling? Let's start there.
I'm in customer service right now, but I wanted to get into marketing.
Okay.
And I have a
Go ahead.
I have a degree in marketing, but not enough experience.
Okay.
I'm wondering how you do that next.
Yeah, totally. And so what have you done to kind of like, how comfortable do you feel marketing? And are we talking marketing as a whole? Like, are you trying to cover all the bases? If I was a company, like if I was going to hire you for Cultivated Culture, are you doing everything for me, from search engine optimization to paid social to writing my email content, et cetera? Or are you trying to niche it down? What are your thoughts there?
I haven't actually done. I mean, I have done multiple things like make SEO, search engine optimization, made websites for made content and such, but it's very general, you know.
Yeah. Definitely. So my number one recommendation to start would be to pick one thing, pick a niche. Same thing. I don't know if you were on the call when we talked about what platform to use, social media, email marketing, etc. But it's a very similar concept. You should just niche down as far as you can get. And I'm not saying you need to find men who are between the ages of 15 and 55 who are having their first daughter who is X, Y, and Z. Like, you don't have to get that niche, but what you want to do is get niche to the point where you are the SEO guy for real estate, or you are the Facebook ads guy for mommy blogs, or something like that. And that can really define your scope, because typically the tough part is when you're starting out and you're in the position that you're in, you just want clients, right? You want anyone. And so you're reaching out to all these different businesses, and it's really hard to pitch a business without necessarily understanding it at a deeper level. Like, I know what a mommy blog is, and I know, what real estate agents do, but do I understand deeply what real estate agents care about, what keeps them up at night, et cetera, et cetera? Not necessarily. And so what I would recommend that you do is I would pick something like that. I would niche it down, and I would make sure that your fundamentals are solid in what you want to freelance in. So if it's Facebook ads, make sure you've taken a ton of courses, maybe even invest a couple $100 running your own campaign, see what works. Find somebody else out there. Even go to Upwork and hire a Facebook ads person and tell them that you don't want them to run your Facebook ads. You just want to watch them, and you want to understand how they run it and what their thought process is, et cetera. And so kind of pay them to shadow them and see what they're doing until you feel comfortable enough. And then go after those companies, learn about them before you pitch anybody. Talk to people, get on the phone. Again, if we're going to stick with real estate, call up a real estate agent and say, hey, I really want to help real estate agents sell more with Facebook ads. And in order to do that, I really need to understand where the gap is for you guys. So what keeps you up at night? What issues are you having? What would you want technology to solve, et cetera? And by doing that a couple of times, then you're gonna have a really good idea. And then when you hop on the phone, you'll be able to talk the jargon. You'll be able to pitch the right services, and what their pain points are already. And that's it. That's 100% it. The rest is just a numbers game. Like I mentioned before, if you got to reach out to a bunch of clients, couple hundred, And that'll probably net you out with, 3, 4 at the end. And then usually it builds from referrals after that. Pretty much everybody I know who's an established freelancer who's been at it for a while, that's the way they started. They just blasted out a ton of cold emails, and then they just wrote referrals after that. So hopefully that helps.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yes.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Anybody else? Yeah, that's a great point. Zachary, thanks so much. Is it Zach or Zachary? Either way.
Zach, yeah, Zach's fine. Thank you.
Zach, awesome. Cool. Yeah, so Zach made a great point. Udemy has sales a lot. And they'll usually give you like a first time sign up bonus where like a course that could be a couple $100 I think it's knocked down to like, Zach, I don't know if you know specifically, I think it's like 19 or 9 or something. So I just created a whole bunch of fake Gmails and just kept signing up for Udemy and kept signing up for those courses and getting them for like $9. So definitely don't pay full price for a Udemy course. Cool. Anybody else got some?
I have a question. Yeah, it's not it's side hustle related. I just wanted to know what's the single most important thing you did to gain email subscribers.
If you're talking like in terms of like an action that I took that immediately resulted in a ton of email subscribers, the best thing, I think the thing that's driven the most total is the main article I have on my site, the how to get a job anywhere with no connections. And the strategy behind that is basically, that's like the entire story, right? Nobody else out there really wrote about finding a job with that perspective, right? So all the job, I mean, that's why you guys are here for the most part, I'd assume, is because the advice on the site is coming, one, from my personal experience and from a place, I've been through the struggle as well. I've been through what a lot of you guys are going through, and it's not the fluffy BS that you can find on some of the other sites, right? It's not like the, tweak your resume and make sure that like you have dear sir in your cover letter and like the standard shit that you get. And so what I did was I wrote that all out, and then I went out and I found, we can just break it down like super granular, if that's cool with you guys. But basically, so there's a Chrome extension. Have you guys heard of Clout? It's like a social media ranker scorer. Either way, it was this company that came out and basically scores people on their web presence. So the more followers they had on Facebook, LinkedIn, across social media profiles, the higher their score was. So basically what I did was I installed that, and it plugs right in with Twitter. So when you go to twitter.com on your desktop, you can see everybody's profile, and it has their little number next to them. So I went and I found people in the career space who had written articles that were not exactly the same, but tangentially related. It was much easier with that article because there's so many different topics baked in there, that it was pretty easy to find something that was fairly relevant. So I find people who had a Clout score over 50, and I just linked to them in the article, and I included a ton of links. I probably had like 30 in there when I launched the article. And basically I had the email capture set up, and that's a whole nother rabbit hole. But basically you just want to make sure you have a way for people to input their email addresses. And then I wrote the whole article out, and then in relevant spots, I would put people's links in. And if I couldn't find a great way to work it into the text, I just have like a related resources section and a little box at the end of that specific section. And I just include a bunch of articles. And then I reached out to all of them after I published it. And I just said, hey, I read your article. I thought it was fantastic. I included it in this gigantic resource guide that I created on how to find a job. It's based on my personal experience. If you think it's share worthy, it would be fantastic if you wouldn't mind spreading the word. I'm just getting started and trying to build my following. If not, it's all good. Like, keep creating awesome content. And so I fired that off to every single person, and I got a bunch of shares. I ended up getting some people who have, I don't know if you guys have heard of like workitdaily.com. They're not quite at the level of the Muse, but like maybe like one notch below them. And a couple sites like that picked it up, and a couple of the influencers. And so the traffic started pouring in. So I think there was like 60,000 visits in the first 60 days, and like 800 email subscribers came from that in the first 60 days. And that's been recurring. So that still drives the most traffic to the site to this day. But that's far and away the number one thing that I did. And that strategy continues to work. So I don't include a ton of links anymore because It's just not, I want to make sure that it's less like filled with links and more actual content for you guys. And now there's kind of a critical mass for people to read it. But yeah, so that's what I would recommend there. The number one thing that I've done to grow my business in general is build relationships with people in the space. I've met like some of my best friends for life through Cultivated Culture just in the last year and a half. And those people who already have audiences, who have connections to other people who are like already huge names. Like for instance, I mentioned Ryan Robinson a lot. I don't know if you guys have heard of him like through me or elsewhere, but he just launched his podcast and now he's connected up with like Pat Flynn, who does the Smart Passive Income podcast, James Altucher, Noah Kagan, Chris Guillebeau. These are all big names to me. I don't know if they mean anything to you guys, but yeah, so building relationships, I would say, is once you've written that first article, and you can just keep scaling that out. You can just keep repeating it, building relationships with people on the side for sure.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, no doubt.
I actually have a blog up right now, but I haven't really been like working on it as much as
What's it called?
What's it called? Called soundsdiscovered.com. It's a music blog. I write about like.
Okay, I like it. So do you share tracks or do you talk about news? What's the deal?
I share music that I like, and like sometimes I've had a couple artists reach out to me and have me write about them, and I write about them, and then sometimes I write about apps.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Throw the link in the chat box. So I want to check it out, and hopefully a couple other people here might give it a shot. But I mean, you know me, I put my music in. I don't know if anybody likes it or not, but it's in the emails. Yeah. So, cool.
I guess I have a question for you, Austin.
Yeah.
What is your end goal with your side hustle? Are you looking to eventually transition into that as like your full-time income?
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, my goal is really to help as many people as possible land jobs that they love, right? I think there's a lot of issues out there today. Like I think the hiring process is completely broken, and I hope that if we get enough people to start using the process that I recommend, building relationships, et cetera, I think that's going to really force companies to take a better look at how they're choosing to hire candidates. And the other thing that I'm really passionate about, it's not my specific like niche or focus, I'd say. It's tangential. And there are a lot of other awesome people out there that are doing it. But the diversity and inclusion aspect is really important, especially not just age, gender, et cetera, but also experience. Like Cheryl mentioned before, people who have been in an industry for one day or 50 years who want to try something else. It's so hard for them to land jobs these days. And it's because companies completely fall back on this idea of traditional credentials, right? Like your GPA, how many years of experience in the industry do you have, et cetera, et cetera. And like that we're finding more and more that that's not the case. Like when I interviewed at Google, like they kept bringing me in. They brought me in for 6 months. I interviewed with like 10 people, and every single one of them was like, you don't have enough sales experience. You don't have enough sales experience. Like, how are you going to sell? Blah, blah, blah. And at the end, I was just fucking sick of it. And now I went to Microsoft, and I'll toot my own horn, but I got this award that they give to the top 200 salespeople across global Microsoft, like the entire 100,000 person company. And so that's happening more and more. And I'm not saying that to toot my own horn. I'm saying that because you guys, I know you're capable of the same thing. I know so many people out there are capable of the same thing, and companies just aren't giving them a chance. So that's my main goal from like a moral ethical perspective. I definitely want to take it on full time and be able to do it. Like I would just want to be able to do this and be around for you guys like way more. And obviously having a full-time job takes up a lot of time. So that's definitely the end goal. I definitely want to get out there and speak a little bit more. I want to get involved with universities because I think for me, that's where the disconnect was. Like I just posted about this on LinkedIn, but like your education isn't preparing people for the workforce these days. It's teaching you how to become like a well-rounded person, maybe with a lot of knowledge about very esoteric things. But then they give you your graduation cap, they send you on your way, and it's usually a slap in the face a lot of the time, unless you're in something where you have a defined career path, like maybe finance, or if you're going on to like medical school or law school or something like that, it's a little bit more structured. Accounting is another one. But for the rest of us that are kind of, we're still not sure. I mean, that's one of the number one things that I get asked on Cultivated Culture is like, how do I figure out what I want to do? Because I'm not sure. And we're expected to know that by the time we're 21 and we're graduated. And if you don't know, then you run into this situation where it's extremely hard to shift between companies, between industries, try different jobs, right? Because then you get called a dumb millennial who job hops and isn't loyal to anybody. And then you got to deal with that whole thing, which sucks. But yeah, so the long answer, but definitely the goal is to take it full time. I definitely want to be available for some coaching, like some one-on-one coaching. I want to do a whole lot more of this, like getting the community together, asking questions. And I'd love your guys' feedback. Like if you think this is a good forum for it, this is the first one. So we're just testing it out. If you'd rather do it on like Facebook Live or something like that, we can totally do it there too. But yeah, I just want to basically be around to help as many people and like provide as much value to you guys as possible. And that coming from the guy who like runs the business and the website, right? But that truly is the case.
Right. No, thank you. That sounds great. Yeah, and I like this platform more. I think it's easier to reach more people. I'm not on Facebook, so.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Sweet. Anybody else? Fire away. This is great.
I've got a question in regards to kind of that similar topic, this branch of like the idea of like social media and working and trying to get a job nowadays. I'm kind of curious about your opinion. I've been trying to get into web development for about a year now, and I've got a couple things going on for me. Not currently creating currency, but I guess I'm keeping myself busy, right? Where it seems like a kind of cycle right now with social media being so freely out there. And I guess I'm kind of curious about this idea of like, how do I keep my identity distinct between like my personal life and my professional life? Not because I necessarily have anything to hide, but because I don't think it's anyone's business. Do you think that that's still something that we're capable of doing in this society, or do you think that that's like no longer a potential?
Yeah, definitely. I think the best way to do it is just to get off the platforms that you're not interested in. So I had, before I started the Facebook group for Cultivated Culture, I didn't have Facebook. I don't have Instagram. I don't have Snapchat. I don't have Twitter. Like if you go look me up on Twitter, it's like a picture of me from college with like my 200 followers from college. And just because that's not what I'm about. Like LinkedIn is where all my people are at, right? Like obviously it makes so much sense for the business. But on top of that, like that's where I want to project my message, and that's where I want people to find me. Like I want them to go there and see everything that's available for them to see there. I don't really want people going to Facebook and seeing like my whole profile there and whatever. So I think it's really up to you. I think, you don't necessarily have to sacrifice like that. That's a very extreme example. I'm not telling you to like delete all your social media and become a hermit, but obviously there's profile settings, there's stuff like that. You could be like, you could just hang out on there and have it for the sake of staying in touch with friends, and you don't necessarily have to update your profile. But I always believe in being authentic. Like you should be you, and you shouldn't try to change your persona online, offline, whatever, to fit like especially anything to do with a company or a corporation, but also other people as well. I don't know if that answers your question. Or clarifies anything. If it doesn't, let me know.
Yeah, I think it kind of, it's kind of dystopian almost, because it's like I don't really like. I do want. It's kind of funny. Like I would prefer, like I don't think that a lot of people think of things in a professional manner. It's like you really have no reason other than what I provide you to look for. You have no reason to try to see anything that I may or may not have done in the past. And we might be, another decade out before people are mature enough to understand, like, the power of this technology. And,
Totally.
We all deserve privacy, you know?
I completely agree 100%. I will say that companies are gonna keep looking at it, and I know people who have lost jobs because of stuff that they posted on social media, or stuff that's come up through the internet. And so I just say be mindful of that. Like, don't change everything. Like, don't be a different person. Don't keep doing what you're doing, and like be yourself. But at the same time, just know that, like, if you want, set your profile settings to like friends only, or do like, I don't know. It's funny. I don't know one guy that does this, but girls do it all the time, where you use like your first name and your middle name, or like you make up a name, and then nobody can really find you. It's pretty hard. But you could do something like that. So there are definitely some ways around it. I would operate with like the best intentions that we're going to get to that point where privacy is like a little bit more of a strong value for companies out there, people out there, etc. But just know that right now, like, that information is accessible, and people are going to look at it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, like, really where I am right now is that, like, I'm trying to get into the IT world, but at the same time I do have my art out there as well. Like, I'm a visual artist, and I don't apologize for that, but at the same time, it's like I do eventually want to make a living, and I kind of worry maybe a little bit about what they look at, but regardless.
Are you in terms of the art, or in terms of other personal stuff?
No, really, the only thing that I have out there is just some visual art, because I would like to still be able to kind of do that, like, on the side, regardless of being in IT. I still have other passions, but I don't really think that it's holding me back, but it was just kind of a curiosity that was kind of floating in my head.
Awesome.
Oh, 1 point. Do you have GitHub?
I don't. Are you talking to me?
I'm talking to the other person, because GitHub is it's a social media basically for developers. So if you post that onto the a link on your application, right? I mean, that's like pretty much the thing that validates you as a developer. You're it's basically a repository. A compilement of your work, basically, in development, and they could see the code and all that stuff. And I'm pretty sure that's the only thing that they want to see, instead of having to look at your social media like Facebook, Instagram, and all that stuff.
Oh yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that, and I appreciate that. I do have a GitHub. Yeah, it was just kind of a curiosity I had, because I know that I've applied to. It's kind of funny. I've applied to. This was a while ago, but I've applied to places, and apparently someone like accidentally like clicked a like on one of my pictures, and I know that it was someone who like worked at a certain company. So it's just like, okay, I don't find that very professional, like, but it's not. I don't think technically it's illegal right now. I don't think that there's any regulation currently in regards to checking people's social media. And even if there were regulations for that, I mean, how on earth would you be able to
enforce them?
Yeah.
I mean, I read in the Harvard Business Review that some guy, he posted something about the actual company, and he was like so close to getting fired, but he was actually more of a fired because of what he did on social media about the company.
Yeah, that's happened a lot. I mean, that the Google guy is a good example too, right? If you guys heard about that, I think he posted about, I think he wrote like a whole dissertation basically about how women are not, like, they're like biologically inferior to men, and so Google should like only promote men to leadership positions. And then it started this whole thing, like, he got fired, obviously, but it started this whole thing, like, he's exercising his First Amendment, and Google, like, without the First Amendment, like where would Google be? Like they would have no content to index. And then other people are like, well, yeah, okay, but like that was the most outrageous thing you could possibly say. And it started this whole deal, which was interesting to follow. Yeah. Okay, cool. I actually wonder how many people know about that here. But basically, if you guys didn't know, here's a funny piece of history. But I was super worried about Microsoft finding out about the side hustle, right? So I actually started the whole site under a pen name. It like wasn't my name, wasn't my picture, wasn't anything. And that actually, when I posted that first article that I spoke about in terms of getting email subscribers, that was under a totally different name. So I also wrote a book and I put it on Amazon too. But that's what Peter's asking in the chat window here. How much did my book help my career? Would I write it again? Was it worth my time? It did not help my career. It didn't really help Cultivated Culture either. I would write it again. I had a lot of fun writing it. It helped me become a better writer. It helped me get out. Like I had to think through a lot of the issues end to end that I hadn't necessarily thought of before, especially like given this platform, it's covering all aspects of the job search, right? So that really brought a lot of ideas and obstacles and topics out that I hadn't considered before. And it was a lot of fun to go through the process of like figuring out, how to write a book, how to format it. There's a whole bunch of stuff, right? Like you have to get a specific formatting for Amazon. There's specific ways to market it. You have to do there's the Amazon algorithm. I don't know if it's past Google for the #1 search engine yet. It's top 3 for sure. Like Google, YouTube, Amazon. But you have to figure out a way to kind of work against the algorithm. And so learning that was awesome. I met this guy who, he's basically like, he has his own business teaching people how to write best-selling Kindle books and market them, etc. And it was really cool to talk to him. So yeah, I would definitely write it again. And was it worth my time? Absolutely. Definitely. Like I've done so much stuff, and I think this is probably an important message for a lot of people, but I've done a ton of stuff that ended up nowhere. And I'm sure that you guys have been in a position where you thought that doing something was like incredibly stupid. And so like I had my own music blog back in college and I got like 20 visitors a day, but I built it on WordPress, which is what the Cultivated Culture site is built on now. And so I got 20 visitors a day. Nobody listened or read any of it. And probably like my mom was like the one email subscriber, but I learned how to build a website on WordPress. And now that's been invaluable for me. And that happens a lot. There have been skills like at other companies that I learned and I thought it was like completely worthless at the time. And it's come back to be really beneficial later on. So I learned a ton writing that book. And I think that's what I learned was pretty invaluable for sure. Didn't like bring in millions of email subscribers or like hit the New York Times bestseller list. But yeah, it was definitely worth it for sure. But thanks so much for spending time with me tonight, guys. I really appreciate it. Thanks for being part of the community. Like this whole thing wouldn't exist without you. So I mean it. I really appreciate it. And I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of the week. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank
All
you.
right, thanks, Austin.
Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah.
See ya.